Okay, I am ready.
But you're going to share your screen too, right?
I am going to share my screen. So we're continuing, and then I'm sharing my screen. I hope. And then I'm going to put my slides up. Can people see my slides yet?
No. Did you really hit share?
I thought so. But okay, let's try that again. Okay. I'm sharing my screen. Oh, I didn't click the right thing. One participant can share at a time, it says. Okay, so I clicked share. And now I'm going to share. There, you guys all moved to my side. Did that work better?
Yes.
Okay, thank goodness we got all of that recorded. Okay, so welcome everybody. And we're talking about sodium today. I heard that our kind of theme for the month has been high blood pressure, and of course it's always heart health. So my class today is more just specific to sodium, not so much about blood pressure. Glad y'all tuned in. We'll save questions for the end. I don't have to run off, so hopefully if you got questions, you can, save them for the end. And so I just wanted to start. I'm going to show a little clip in a minute that's from Dr. Greger, because I thought I had all these slides on salt or sodium and foods, but really nothing about why it mattered. And so that's why I'm going to do this clip. But how much sodium, I want you to kind of keep this in mind, should we be consuming? Well, they say the upper limit is 2,300 milligrams a day. That's for the general population, people 50 and younger who are healthy. 2,300 milligrams is just a little bit less than a teaspoon of salt, of regular old salt. So you might think, well, I would never eat a tablespoon of or teaspoon of salt. But if you ever have had a can of Campbell's soup in your life or gone to a restaurant, you have eaten that in one meal. But the true number, and I don't know why a lot of people like to hide this number, but the true number is 1,500 milligrams. I think they think that's too hard. You'll always hear 2,000 milligrams or a 2-gram diet, but really the upper limit should be 1,500 milligrams, about 2/3, really smaller than 2/3 of a teaspoon of salt a day for adults 51 and older, which I think is a lot of us, anyone with diabetes, hypertension, or kidney disease, which is a lot of us, and African Americans, which are some of us. So these tend to be the guidelines, and still people always say, oh, it's 2,000 or it's 2,300. But really, for most of us who are listening to this, we should be 1,500 milligrams or less. I think that people think it's just too hard. But we're going to find out that if we're following the diet plan that we're leaning towards, it isn't all that hard. So why do we even care what our blood pressure is? Well, or what sodium, how much sodium we have? Well, because of blood pressure, that's what it's associated with, and arterial function. So really, high salt can also damage our blood vessels, the lining of our blood vessels. And high blood pressure is associated, just to think more currently, more severe COVID problems. I put symptoms, but it's really problems associated with COVID if you had high blood pressure. But also, last time I talked, we talked about Alzheimer's and brain health. High blood pressure is associated with that. And in fact, I'm going to show a little clip here of Dr. Greger from nutritionfacts.org. And he sends out a little video or a blog every day. And his one today was how high blood pressure is associated with brain shrinkage, which is associated with Alzheimer's too. But another thing that we always worry about when we have high blood pressure is stroke, heart disease, kidney disease, poor eye health. You know, every time I go to the eye doctor, they're looking in my eyes to see if blood pressure has damaged any of my blood vessels in there. So I'm going to click on this link, and I've got a little picture here of some beets. That's my little story to tell while we're waiting for the YouTube to come up, because I notice it takes a little bit. So those are beets from my garden, and you'll notice they're rainbow beets. I roasted them. I just wrap them in foil and stick them in the oven on like a 425 or so for, I don't know, some of them were big, so it took a while, but I don't know where my thing went. I think it's still working. But my story is, I'm really not a great gardener. And so I had planted last winter rainbow chard. And so it was doing great all winter and into the spring. And I kept cutting off the chard, and it was rainbow chard, and it was all these different colors. It was gorgeous. I was giving it away. I've never grown anything that I had enough to give away. So then, you know, around May, I thought I need to put in my summer garden, and this is looking kind of, you know, grungy. So I'm going to pull it out. And as I pulled out my rainbow chard, I noticed there were a bunch of beets. So all along, it had been rainbow beets, not rainbow chard. So then I had like 50 beets that had been growing all winter long, and they were amazing, but that is my beet story. You can tell I'm really not a great gardener. But okay, I'm going to show this little video, and I think it's called High Blood Pressure May Be a Choice. It's 5 minutes, 46 seconds. Dr. Greger is great at looking at the research and kind of explaining things. I love how he does that. And if you like him or haven't done it yet, he is on nutritionfacts.org, and you can sign up to get a little video or a blog every day. And if you don't want to read it, you just hit delete. So, okay, here we go. I hope it works. Let me know if it doesn't.
Of our evolution, we ate diets contain less than a quarter.
Can you turn it up?
Turn it up. Let me try. That's max.
Millions of years without salt shakers.
Does that help?
We served us well until we discovered salt could be used to preserve foods.
Not really.
Big boom to human civilization, of course. This may have led to a general rise in blood pressure, but who cares if the alternative is starving to death because all your food rotted away? But where does that leave us now when we no longer have to live off pickles and jerky? We are genetically programmed to eat 10 times less salt than we do now. Even many low-salt diets can be considered high-salt diets. That's why it's critical to understand what the concept of normal is when it comes to salt. Having a normal salt intake can lead to a normal blood pressure, which can help us die from all the normal causes, like heart attacks and strokes. Doctors used to be taught that a normal systolic blood pressure is approximately 100 plus H. Systolic blood pressure means the top number. And indeed, that's about what we're born with. Babies start out with a blood pressure around like 95 over 60. But then as we age, that 95 can go to 120 by our 20s, then 140 by our 40s, the official cutoff for high blood pressure, and keep climbing as we age. That was considered normal since everyone's blood pressure creeps up as we get older. And if that's normal, then heart attacks and strokes are normal too, since risk starts rising once we start getting above the 100 we had as a baby. But if blood pressures over 100 are associated with disease, maybe they should be considered abnormal, perhaps caused by our abnormally high salt intake, 10 times more than what our bodies were designed to handle. Maybe if we just ate a natural amount of salt, our blood pressures naturally would not go up with age and we'd be protected. Of course, to test that theory, you'd have to find a population in modern times that doesn't use salt or eat processed food or go out to eat. For that, you'd have to go deep into the Amazon rainforest. Meet the Yanomamo people, a no-salt culture. Lowest salt intake ever reported, which is to say normal for our species salt intake. And so what happens to their blood pressure? They start out with a blood pressure of about 100 over 60 and end up with a blood pressure of about 100 over 60. So theirs is described as a salt-deficient diet. That's like saying they have a diet deficient in Twinkies. They're the ones, it seems, eating normal salt intakes, apparently leading to truly normal blood pressures. Those in their 50s having the blood pressure of a 20-year-old. The percentage of the population tested that had high blood pressure, 0. Whereas elsewhere in Brazil, up to 38% of the population may be affected. The Yanomamos probably represent the ultimate human example of the importance of salt on blood pressure. But look, it could have been other factors. They didn't drink alcohol, ate a high-fiber plant-based diet, lots of exercise, no obesity. There's a number of plant-based populations eating little salt that experience no rise in blood pressure as they age. So how do you know what exactly is to blame? And ideally, we do an interventional trial. I mean, imagine If you took people literally dying from out of control high blood pressure, so-called malignant hypertension, where you go blind from bleeding into your eyes, your kidneys shut down, your heart fails, and then you withhold from those people blood pressure medication, so their fate is certain death, and then you put them on a Yanomamo level of salt intake, a normal for human species salt intake. And if instead of dying, they walked away cured of their hypertension, that would pretty much seal the deal. Enter Dr. Walter Kempner and his rice and fruit diet. Patients coming in with blood pressures of 210/140, dropping down to 80/60. Now, the reason he could ethically withhold all modern blood pressure medications and treat with diet alone, the drugs hadn't been invented yet. This is back in the 1940s. Now, the diet wasn't just extremely low salt, but strictly plant-based, extremely low fat, protein, calories. But there's no doubt that Kempner's rice diet achieved remarkable results, and Kempner is now remembered as the person who demonstrated beyond any shadow of a doubt that high blood pressure can often be lowered with a low enough salt diet. 40 years ago, it was acknowledged that the evidence is very good, if not conclusive, that a low enough reduction of salt in the diet would result in the prevention of essential hypertension, that rising of blood pressure as we age, and its disappearance is a major public health problem. It looks like we knew how to stop this 4 decades ago. In that time, how many people have died? Today, high blood pressure may wipe out 400,000 Americans every year. 1,000 unnecessary deaths every day.
Okay. So now I need to get back to my slides, right? Where are they? Where are they? Hold it, I'll find it. There we go. Okay. Kind of scary, huh? Okay, so we want to get that blood pressure under control. So today we're talking about salt to get it under control by lowering our salt. So I've got 6 steps here, but we could stop at step number 1 if we're following a real
All you have to do to lose weight and
my
have
gosh.
the perfect body
Hold on.
is to eat less. How many times have you heard that tired?
Let me get that done. Sorry about that.
Go on an extremely low-calorie diet.
Where did that come from?
Wrong. Losing weight does not mean always being.
Your video is still playing.
It does not mean salads.
I don't know where to
3 times
find
a
it.
day. And before you slam me with the whole, that's easy for you to say.
That's
This isn't
us.
about me.
I
This
don't
is
know
about
who's even
the
talking.
thousands of people worldwide that I've been fortunate
It's
enough
YouTube. It's the video after the one you just played.
I can't find my YouTube
real
though.
food all day long, yet
I
still
can't find
lose weight
it.
faster than you ever have.
Help me.
Now,
Oh, where
you
is
think
it?
that I'm being a little too harsh, but please know that I need to break through to you because I want to
You have an
help.
icon below that's open.
No.
Place your
Okay.
hands on your stomach.
Oh
right
my
now.
gosh, this guy is crazy.
Place
Okay,
your
sorry.
hands on your
Stop.
stomach.
Stop.
Now,
Stop.
where is most of the fat located? Is it on your front?
He's
it on
alive.
the
He
side?
won't get out of
Maybe
here.
your back? Grab the belly fat. Is it a pinch? or
Close
can
that
you
tab.
grab-
Close.
You can get a full handful.
I don't want to do all
Now,
3
how
though,
long have you
right?
been struggling with
Yeah, I don't think you care.
Okay. Gosh, I'm so sorry. I didn't know it would keep going. Okay, I'm still in. You're still in?
Yes, but you need to go back to your slides.
That was scary. Sorry about that. Whew.
Nice recovery, though. Quite
Oh,
awesome.
yeah. That's again, I'm so glad you have that recorded. Okay, so here we are. Step number 1. The only step we really need is if we eat a whole food diet, mostly from plants or all plants. And so notice it says real food from plants, not made in a plant. So if we get rid of processed foods, it's kind of like when Dr. Greger talked about that population. He needed to find a population that didn't add any salt, that things are just happening to my computer that I don't even know what is happening. And they didn't eat any processed food. And that study on those Indians was back in 75. In fact, I made a note to check to see if they're still eating like that. I don't know. But if we did that, the whole real foods don't really have much salt. We would keep well under our 1,500 if we ate whole real foods. So then we wouldn't have to go any further. But unfortunately, we do eat some processed foods. I bet we could find some in your cupboard. There's some in mine. I went to find some of my highest sodium things in my cupboard. So the next step would be to get rid of any salt shockers, things that are just crazy high. Another one would be to read our labels for salt. But again, if we're eating, number one, most of our food doesn't have many labels. Make healthy substitutions, so swapping out things that are lower sodium, modifying our favorite recipes, and eating at home more often. Most of our sodium comes from processed foods and restaurant meals. So first thing we think about on the whole foods, how much salt's in fruit? Pretty much 0. How much salt's in fresh veggies? Less than 50 or milligrams or even less. Frozen, some frozen veggies, they add a little salt. Like peas, for some reason, they add some salt to those. But mostly our frozen veggies that don't have extra sauces, hardly any. Intact whole grains, oats, brown rice, barley, quinoa, buying it in its natural form, no sodium. Dried beans, no sodium. So eating foods in their most natural form, we just don't have to worry about things. So I know that's the diet we're striving for, but still, I know we still do things to the food, our whole real foods. Like I add sauces sometimes. Soy sauce is probably one of the biggest salt shockers in your cupboard. A tablespoon of soy sauce is 1160 milligrams for a tablespoon. Remember, our daily allotment should be 1,500 or less. Even the less sodium soy sauce is 575. So there's still quite a bit. Teriyaki sauce, which is just sweet soy sauce, 610. So what are we going to marinate with then, or add sauces? Because I remember when I was a dietitian, I first started, this one lady said to me, "You mean you just eat broccoli without putting anything on it?" And I said, "Well, yeah, actually I do." But I learned that not everybody does that. So we need to jazz things up. So we can season or marinate. They got wine here. Vinegars are awesome. And you know, they have all those flavored vinegars we can use nowadays. Juice, it's a citrus juice, but you know, I like a little lemon, a little lime. That goes a long way to spice things up. And then there's prepared things. So if we're buying anything in a box or can, it is loaded with salt, not just as a preservative, but because it tastes good. So ramen noodles, which I'm hoping none of us are eating, but we might have back in our college days, $16.60 in one package over our daily allotment. A can of Campbell's soup, which I have in my cupboard, I keep just for talks just like this. Tomato soup, $9.60. Healthy Request, so even good, the healthier version, which is a little lower in sodium, $8.10. Even just Progresso vegetable soup, $500. In my cupboard, I found a chicken noodle, and it was $8.90. And then I got these for my husband back when COVID started, and he was so worried we weren't gonna have any food. He just grabbed a bunch of cans of soup, $7.90, and that's for half a can. And most of us nowadays, we eat the whole can. So the answer is we make our own soups, and we use a low sodium broth or water as our base. And here's cured foods. Sauerkraut started out as cabbage, but then they cured it and added salt, added a bacteria to get it to do its little fermenting thing, and it's 1120. That one kind of breaks my heart because sauerkraut is a healthy fermented food we're supposed to be eating, but it is loaded with sodium. And then dill pickles started out as a cucumber, no salt. Now it's $4.20. Pickle relish, this would even be like a sweet pickle relish, $4.60. So the answer here is to eat it fresh and eat just cucumbers. Don't necessarily have them pickled. Or you can also make your own with some no sodium pickling spices, which I have not done for a really long time, but I know it is possible. And then here, anything in a box or can or anything with instant in the title, they add a little salt to help it to cook faster. Now, I know none of us would eat some Kraft mac and cheese, but we might make it for the grandkids. 1 cup, 1,300 milligrams. Even go and you think, well, I'm eating plant-based, I'm eating that vegan mac and cheese in a box, $5.10. Remember, anything in a box, gonna have some salt. Instant mashed potatoes, $900. Instant flavored rice, like a rice-a-roni, $800. So the best choice, and you're seeing it through all of these, is homemade, making our own mashed potatoes, making our brown rice, getting intact whole grains and cooking those. And then we're gonna add our own seasonings that aren't salt. Processed meats, I know we're getting away from meat, but I had to leave meat here just to show us like how terrible it is. So just some regular deli meats like ham or turkey looks over 600 in just 2 ounces. And if you think, well, I don't eat meat, I'm going vegan, I eat the vegan lunch meats like a tofurkey, they're still loaded, 300. Hot dog, 420, a veggie dog, 730, even more. And you know, I meant to look up and I didn't, like the Impossible Burgers and the Beyond Burgers now that they have, those are all loaded with sodium. So just because they don't have meat doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be a healthy choice. So our option here is to limit our processed meats, even our processed plant meats, and eat plant proteins like beans, where we're in control of what goes in it. So those would just be some shockers. And I bet after, when we get done with the talk, hopefully some of you all can share a shocker or two that you might have in your cupboards. We'll just lay it all out there. So step 2 is to look at your labels. And so you gotta be a bit of a sodium detective. So here's just a little tip on sodium. If we got, say, 1,500 milligrams a day is our goal. If we kept our sodium at each meal to less than 500, we'd be there. And then I've got here, keep meals about 500 calories, but some of us need more calories than that, so that's fine if we go over. But the key is, what's safe is to have less sodium than calories. So if that, I don't know, that vegan mac and cheese, I can't remember what it was, let's say it was 320 for my sodium, but it was only 200 calories, that wouldn't be a good choice. It's gonna have more salt than calories. And the way that works is, if we're doing, say, a 1,500 calorie diet or even a 2,000 calorie diet, if we have our sodium less than our calories, we're gonna stay under the number. That's how that works out in the math. Now, I included this little picture of the nutrition facts label. There's a new label out now. So you see the old one there at the bottom, the new one at the top. They changed a few things on the new label. For our sodium, we're just gonna look straight at our sodium, where it lists sodium. So it says at the top one, 270 milligrams of sodium. That actually, they changed the daily value. See those little percentages along the side? Those are our daily value of what they expect a typical American to eat. So if I ate this and it had 270 milligrams of sodium, that's 12% of what I should have all day based on a typical American 2,000 calorie diet. The trouble is, most of us aren't the typical American. Most of us in this group, and me included, are aiming for 1,500. So that doesn't really work for us, but that's what those percentages are. On the new label, they made the calories bigger so we could see it right out of the gate. They made the serving sizes a little more realistic, which is good and bad. You know, sometimes they can make the calories so small because they make the portion so small. And so people say, well, that's ridiculous. On the other hand, bigger sizes just mean we're also getting more calories. But they made them more realistic. They adjusted the fiber goal. It used to be 25, now it's 28. The biggest thing they did, and one of the coolest things, is under total carbohydrates. They always had total sugar, but now they say of that sugar, how much of it was added. Because you might see a peach, and if the peach had a label, it would say 15 grams carb, 15 grams sugar. And you might think, oh, I'm trying to watch my sugar, and put that back. Well, that's not added sugar. It's the added sugar we care about. Another example would be like Raisin Bran. So Raisin Bran has sugar in the raisins, but then it also has sugar on every flake and raisin. So it doesn't make it necessarily bad because there's raisins, but we will care about that added sugar that they sprinkled on everything. So those were some of the biggest things that they did on the label. They also took away the calories from fat. You can see that at the bottom. I don't know, it was always kind of worthless information. And then at the very bottom of the old nutrition facts label, you can see that they have little notes about how they created those daily values, what the typical American diet should be. And so they adjusted that a little bit. But when you're looking for sodium, I wouldn't worry about that percentage. I would go straight to the milligrams. We want to aim for 1,500 milligrams or less. In this situation, we've got 270 milligrams of sodium in this top one, 150 calories, by what we just had on the previous slide, this would be a put back on the shelf. It's too high in salt because it's got more salt than it's got calories. So that's just a little rule of thumb. Okay, so you're looking at your labels, and then you could substitute. So I don't know what your favorite meals are. I just threw some in here just as examples, but you can take a look at what you have on your own. But say a cup of Raisin Bran and a cup of not that milk. Now I know we're striving more whole grain, real foods, and plant milks. So Raisin Bran is a processed food, and it's hard to believe, but cereals have salt in them because they don't taste salty to us. They taste sweet. So, but if we go to shredded wheat, or if we just, we'll do oatmeal in a minute, there's none added to that. And then I switched to a plant-based milk. It's still got a little. Milk has a little sodium in it, surprisingly. So does most of our plant milks, about 100. If you like, say, frozen waffles, I'm a frozen waffle lover myself. There's like 390 in those. It's a process, somebody else made it. But when I have my little banana oat muffins waffles that I just made this morning from a old banana and a cup of oatmeal that I blended up, my 2 waffles this morning probably had 200 milligrams or less. And the sodium comes not from the banana or the oats, but it comes from the plant milk that I added to it and the little splash of baking powder that I added to it. So that's where the salt comes from. Let's say you like to have a bagel. Well, a bagel is generally the equivalent to 4 pieces of bread, and all bread has salt in it, unless you're buying specific low sodium bread, because you need some salt to slow down the yeast. So a Noah's bagel, if you don't go to Noah's, that's just kind of the big bagel. You could also get it in the bins at any grocery store you go to. Those are the bigger bagels, equivalent to 4 pieces of bread, so 560 milligrams of sodium in that. And I just put, if you like, a little butter or whatever on it. But if we switch that to something smaller, a whole wheat English muffin, let's say, or 2 pieces of Dave's Killer Bread, you got 270, and I don't know, I like peanut butter on mine because then we're getting a little protein. So, and I get the no salt peanut butter, so it's very low. And then what about instant oatmeal? A lot of people tell me, oh, I like that instant oatmeal, or I like the little packages. They add salt to it so it'll cook fast, so $2.90 in one package. Whereas I could get a cup of old-fashioned oatmeal for nothing. And actually, that's even double the portion, because usually it's only half a cup in one of those packets. So the more natural, the less processed it is, the less sodium we're going to have. So that's just kind of typical breakfast. What about meals? I put, a typical meal might be a sandwich and a cookie. I don't know. So you get one of those veggie burger patties because you like those. $3.10. It's super processed. Veggie cheese slice, $2.20. Couple pieces of bread, $2.60. Dijon mustard. This one kind of does break my heart because I'm a Dijon lover. A tablespoon of Dijon, $3.45. And then you choose some kind of healthy vegan cookie, $2.50. So you've got really our whole daily allotment practically in that one meal. So if we were going to substitute, we could switch to, say, hummus, which we would have made ourselves, so it would not have very much salt. So say 60. We could also make our own veggie patty and keep it pretty low. Instead of smearing Dijon on, we could smear a little avocado on there. We could DK on the bread is Dave's Killer Bread, one of my personal faves, but less than, I think they're about 100 a slice. And then you just pile it a foot high with a bunch of veggies, less than 50 in all those veggies. And then your nectarine or fruit or orange or whatever you like. So we got $3.10 for one meal. We got a little room to spare. Then we got to think about our condiments because they add a lot of salt to our condiments. We already learned about our Dijon, whereas regular yellow mustard, only $1.65. And this is a trick I've just been using lately. If I'm doing a recipe like a salad dressing and it calls for Dijon or calls for mustard, I just use the powdered mustard. There's no salt in that. Veganese is just like a plant-based mayonnaise, but it's loaded. So you spear avocado on your bread instead, or you do a little more of that mustard or however you like it. Ranch dressing, all the dressings are loaded, but if you just did a little oil and vinegar or just vinegar, personally, I'm a just vinegar girl. I like all those flavored vinegars. I got my peach vinegar and my apricot vinegar. I love those. And to me, that's all you need for a salad dressing. Instead of ketchup, 160 and a tablespoon of ketchup, you just use a slice of tomato. So we go to more fresh, more whole real foods when you can. And then there's snacks. Like you might love popcorn. Everybody tells me they love the big bags of popcorn. But 8, 10. Now you can get lower sodium ones probably. But if you just did air popped, none. Salted almonds, you go for the raw almonds, you got none. Get a bar, pick any bar. They're going to have some sodium in it. Instead of a bar, have a piece of real food. Have an apple. Pretzels, one of my kind of kryptonite foods, loaded with salt, and I just wouldn't even bother eating them if I got the unsalted, but $2.50. So we could get unsalted pretzels. We could make our own little kale chips if we wanted something crunchy. I mean, we go to the whole real foods. Cheese stick, a lot of times people like that. But why not just have carrots? If we're doing a more whole food, plant-based diet, we need to do our fruits and our vegetables and things without added salt. And then what about desserts? I know we're not going to eat any of these things, but I had to put them up here just to show. Look at the bottom one, Dairy Queen Small Oreo Blizzard. 500. Who would have guessed there'd be that much in a blizzard? Because it's not salty at all. But even, our vegan ice cream, we think we're doing good by eating these packaged foods that are plant-based, but they still have loads of salt in them. So we could do it just a juice bar if we want a sweet treat. No sodium in those. Instead of the apple pie, we go for a baked apple and put a little brown sugar and cinnamon on it. Instead of a cheesecake, of course, we might go just grilled fruit or grilled fruit skewers, which is kind of nice. We did that for 4th of July. Instead of Dairy Queen anything, I put oatmeal peanut butter bites, which are these little balls we've made in the past with little oats and a little peanut butter and a little honey. And so those would be lower. So we want to just really think of our normal foods, think about the sodium contribution and make little substitutions. And then on our recipes, all our recipes call for salt. So we got to just modify it. We can leave out salt out of every recipe. When you're cooking pasta, you don't need to add the salt. The trouble is it's going to be bland at first, but the more we get used to no salt, the easier it is to handle. Then we're used to it. We learn to love salt. We weren't born to love it. We learned to love it. So cook with fresh ingredients, whole real foods, add extra herbs and spices for flavor, and don't add any salt if you can leave it out. The only time you really need a little salt is in your bread, if you're making bread from scratch. So this is a nice chart, and I think I've given it to you before, but this came from, I think, Forks Over Knives maybe. But I love the seasonings, and it kind of shows what goes with which kind of genre of food. And then they've got the Mrs. Dash blends at the bottom. So I always like to reference this. And one thing, as we've been shut down, one thing I've been doing more is making more seasoning blends. So a recipe calls for Italian seasoning. So I just Google Italian seasoning recipe, and then I make a bunch from things I already have in my cupboard. I mean, really, if you look at those lists, those are things you probably have in your cupboard mostly. So then you just take a little from each of those jars, and then now you've got a Mexican seasoning. Now you got an Italian seasoning. Now you got an Indian seasoning. So I actually love making my own little spice blends. And I generally just Google it. And I have a couple that are included in these slides of my Italian and my Mexican one. So then step 5 is a big one. It's not so hard now that we're quarantining, or a lot of us are, but we got to eat at home more often, because you cannot walk into a restaurant without getting your daily allotment of sodium at one meal. But we could start when we're eating at home by not shaking at the table. We could pack our own lunches and snacks from home when we're out and about doing errands. We could entertain at home when we're able to. I know we can't do that right now, instead of going out to restaurants. I don't know why everything is associated with food. Let's go out. If we're going to get together with people, it's always, let's go here, let's go eat, let's go do that. But maybe you have people over when we are allowed to do that. Because eating at home can be exhausting if you're cooking 3 meals a day. So planning ahead, cooking ahead, freezing things, and that's what my talk is going to be later in this month, is about a little bit more about batch cooking. So you don't have to do all this stuff every day, because I know that can be exhausting. So eating healthy, and watch your restaurants. When you go to a restaurant, I don't know how you feel about this, but we do need to be assertive. And you need to be nice. You need to say it nicely and be polite. I always open with, you know, I'm so sorry, I'm gonna ask you a million questions. That's just what I'm gonna do, so they know. But ask for what you want. Ask for their nutrition information. You know, nowadays we've got calories and sometimes carbs or fat on the menu, but they don't ever put salt on the menu. I mean, if they don't have it, ideally, if you're going to a place, you could look it up in advance so you might know. But it's okay to make special requests. Like, how about cooking that without putting any salt on it, without putting any oil on it? Always go for the freshest things. Order a big salad. You know, I don't know if I'll ever do salad bars again, but order a big salad, ask for vinegar for your dressing, ask for anything that's potentially going to be high salt on the side. Some things that might be on your salad that are high salt might be the olives, or sometimes they'll put capers on there. Sometimes they'll put pickles. So you could ask for those on the side so you can decide how much you want. Some of the prepared sides are going to be high. You could order fruit instead. I'm thinking like you got to breakfast and maybe they've got potatoes, so you could ask for fruit instead. Have a baked potato instead of rice at some restaurants. Most restaurants, when they cook rice, are going to do it in a broth with salt. So at home, you can do your own rice in your low sodium broth, but getting that baked potato might be the better choice. And I just put here as an example, because you think you're doing good. You're going to Subway, you're getting that veggie patty. It's got 1140 in it, just that 1 6-inch. And most of it, well, at least half of that or more is just from the bread, and the other half is the veggie patty. So even when you think you're making your very best choice, they're usually loaded with salt. So I just threw this little bit in. We talked about this in my last talk, the DASH diet, because the diet for brain health that they tend to like is called the MIND diet, which is a combination of the Mediterranean diet and this DASH diet. This was a huge study in the 90s. It stands for Dietary Approaches to Stop Hypertension. They locked everybody in a room. They fed them lots of fruits and vegetables. They did include low or non-fat milk and yogurt in this one. It was lower fat. It was a little higher in fiber. They lowered the sodium to 2,300 milligrams the first round. But then they did DASH 2, where they modified the sodium down to 1,500 milligrams. And lo and behold, the people who were on the 1,500 milligram arm had even more improvement in their blood pressure, no surprise. But one thing that came out, well, many things came out of the DASH diet, but one was that eating foods with these particular 3 minerals, potassium, magnesium, and calcium, tended to blunt the effects of having too much salt. So we want to focus, if we're eating whole real foods, you can see all of these are whole real foods. So we got fruits and vegetables, we got whole grains, we got nuts and seeds. They even threw coffee and tea. I mean, who doesn't love that? Tofu's in there. Darker bread for the potassium, soybeans. So focusing on these, now they did include, you know, I hate this, but they did include the low fat and non-fat dairy, but we can still get the same effects when we do our plant milks. Because our plant milk, if we get a calcium fortified plant milk, whether you like oat, almond, you know, soy, whatever you like. So bottom line, if we're gonna lower the sodium in our diet, we could stop here at number 1, eat a whole real food plant diet. When we're eating whole real foods, nothing in a box or can, we're gonna generally be very low in sodium. But we're still going to probably add some things to that. So in that case, we want to get rid of those salt shockers. Like, be careful with your soy sauce and your marinades. Look at your labels for salt. Make your healthy substitutions. If you think, oh my gosh, she talked about Raisin Bran twice. I love Raisin Bran. Well, maybe we could switch to a different type of cereal. Modify your recipes. Just leave that salt out. But you generally are going to have to spice it up with some other things. And eat at home more often. And if you go out, be careful about your choices. So I think Linda puts my slides on the website. So in case you're interested in this, but I really, frankly, I just Google it and pick whatever one is the stuff I have in my cupboard. This is a Italian blend. So I put all of these into a little container and I've got my little Italian blend. So it's got those Italian flavors and I just shake it on everything. And then I've got my Mexican seasoning. because I don't know about you, but I was raised on the little packets. I have one right here. McCormick's taco seasoning. I don't know if you were raised on those like I was. But in one of these, 2 teaspoons of mix, which they say is 1 serving, has 380 milligrams of sodium, not counting everything else I might have put on my tacos. So this just is things I had in my cupboard. Chili powder, cumin, garlic powder, paprika, oregano, onion powder, black pepper, crushed red pepper. And by the way, if any of these seasonings ever call for salt, I just leave the salt out. But you can make your own blends of so many things. I recently was doing some Moroccan cooking, and it said, get this Moroccan seasoning. So I just Googled it, of course, thank goodness for Google, and made my own seasoning. Stuff I already had in the cupboard. So you can make your own stuff. Now, I just got a little email today, and it was some famous quotes or meaningful quotes. So I liked this one because I thought it kind of related to sodium. This is by Milton Mills, who is the past president of the American Heart Association. And I believe he's a cardiologist too. None of us ask for fried chicken, pork chops, or ice cream in the delivery room. When we're born, we don't have any preferences. Everything we think we like, we were taught to like. So we were taught to like sodium. We were taught to like packaged foods. And that's, I don't know about you, I was raised on packaged foods. And so, you know, that was just the era. But we were taught to like that stuff, so we can unlike it. The thing is with salt is we really learn to love salt. And at first it tastes horrible when you're leaving the salt out, which is why we've got to be very generous with our other seasonings, or our lemon, or our lime, or our Mrs. Dash. And so just thinking about what you have in your cupboards, is there anything we got to watch out for? And I've got 2 things, my little pictures here, 2 things I got as stories. One is the one on the left, the Twinkies. Linda sent me this text last week. She goes, this was on the shelf at the grocery store. These are like Twinkie cereals. Like they sell this to people. This is what we're feeding to our kids and our grandkids. I meant to look up how much sodium was in it, but I didn't. But there's no real food in that at all. And that's what everybody's eating. And the thing on the right is just one of my newest recipes. I Googled it. I saw one of my friends had made it. It's a lentil bolognese, which is generally a meat sauce, Italian meat sauce. And so they use the lentils instead of the meat. And it's as low sodium as the ingredients you add to it, because it called for a jar of spaghetti sauce or whatever. Now you can get a no salt or very low salt spaghetti sauce. I actually had some frozen leftover spaghetti sauce and a little partial jar of this, and I had a low sodium can of tomato, so I mixed all that up as my sauce. And then I put it over the zucchini noodles, but it was really excellent. So if you like that kind of thing, I encourage you to Google lentil bolognese, and I used the recipe from Minimalist Baker. I use hers a lot. So it was actually very good, and it can be very low sodium depending on how you add things to it. So I think that's all I got. So I'm stopping sharing and opening up to questions or chats or whatever you got for me. See some chats.
Debbie.
Yes, Bobby.
Wow, I hear an echo.
You were.
Okay, I want to show you this, and let me see if I can get it into the camera.
Okay.
Oh.
No salt added. Yeah.
And when you read the label on the back, it's 25 calories per tablespoon, and there is no salt in it. No sodium.
That's excellent. You know, I have never bought that. I knew it's out there. You're right. I think there's no sodium, lots of things. And I've never gotten that. So good for you. That's a perfect example. That's nice.
It's hard to find right now.
I bet it is.
You know, so whenever I see it, because it comes in small bottles, I buy 2 or 3 at a time.
Yeah.
What is she talking about? What is she talking about?
She's holding up a picture of Heinz no salt added ketchup. Tomato ketchup by Heinz that they don't add salt. Does it taste good, Bobby?
Yeah.
Okay.
It tastes great.
Good.
It tastes just like ketchup.
Okay. I like it.
And so it's really good to use. I mix it with other things sometimes.
Okay, that's good. Yeah, I have a lot of recipes that call for a little ketchup. You're right. And I see a question here. Is it better to pay attention to the amount of sodium than the calories sometimes? And I would have to say so. It all depends on the situation. I mean, I don't know if any of us are counting calories. So I would pay attention to the sodium more often than not, but I'm trying to think of a food that might be really low calorie, bless you, like even soy sauce, super low calorie, but loaded with salt. So just because something has more calories in it sometimes doesn't mean it's bad. It just might have more calories. So I would say sodium more importantly. You know, if I'm trying to lose weight, I'm being a little tighter on my calories, I might watch those a little bit more. And who sets the requirements? It's the USDA, United States Department of Agriculture, but they have a whole dietary guideline committee, and they're the ones that kind of set that based on the research. They just redid the sodium one recently. And what about the no salt salt? Well, salt is really, it's sodium chloride. It's sodium hooked to a chloride, so two minerals. And what the no salt ones are potassium chloride. So true, it's not sodium, but I think if you really love the salt flavor and don't want to get rid of it, that's not a bad choice, but we would only want to shake. We would not want to use a teaspoon of that in a recipe, because for some of us, we do have to be careful about how much potassium we get kind of unnaturally. Potassium in our fruits and vegetables is fine, but when it's crammed into a teaspoon of salt, that can be a lot at one time for a heart for some of us. But if you like to shake it, that's fine. The only thing I think about that is that if we're always eating things that taste like salt, we're never going to get used to the no salt flavor. And so sometimes I think we just got to focus on getting away from that salty flavor. So I feel the same way about artificial sweeteners too. You know, we're trying to get away from sweets, and the more we eat sweet, the more we want it. The more we eat salt, the more we want it. So if any of you have ever been, you know, like when I was in the hospital, I was in for a week. Nothing I had salt on it. And when I came home, I could not believe how salty, like my mom got me some nuts with salt in it. Oh my gosh, I couldn't even eat them. They were so salty. So you go a week with no salt and you lose the taste for it.
Can I ask a question?
Certainly.
I'm limited to 720 milligrams of sodium per day.
Okay.
Because I retain fluid.
Uh-huh.
Do you have any recommendations besides what you just showed us, like substituting item for item?
Well, they are going to make, I mean, in a perfect world, we'd make everything from scratch. So I'm thinking like beans. Here we're saying we want to eat some more beans. So I'm holding up, I don't know if you can see it. I've got my no salt added beans versus my beans that have salt in them. So they're really, for most anything in a can, you can get a no salt added version. Now, these say low sodium. So low sodium to them is 130 milligrams in a serving. No salt added is even better because they don't add salt to it. Compared to my can that they didn't do anything to, it has 300 milligrams in a serving. So I would just, I would try not to buy anything in a can if I could help it. And if I did, I would go for the no salt added. I would try to do fresh veggies. And if I couldn't do that, I would do frozen as opposed to canned. If you have something like, I mean, I'm trying to watch my salt. And so even my no salt added or my low sodium one, I'm going to rinse it off. If it's something rinsable, you lose about 40% of the salt. So just run it in a colander. Of course, you know, I can't drain my soup. So I would try to do my own. I would do low sodium broth. Any cans I add to, I would do low sodium or fresh whenever I could. But they do make, you know, like Bobby showed that ketchup. They have a low sodium ketchup. They have a low sodium mustard. They have low sodium salad dressings. So if we're not ready to make everything from scratch, they do make low sodium versions of almost everything.
Okay.
Yes. let's see, I'm looking through my questions. Does coffee interfere with nutrient absorption? If so, is coffee best consumed before or after meals? You know, it actually does. You were right, coffee and tea, because of the tannins in them. So ideally, you would consume them in between meals, although who does that? Who has coffee in between meals? You know, you have it with breakfast. But it's a lot for the iron and the calcium absorption. So in a perfect world, if you could, you would have those in between meals, before or after. Probably your next question is how long before or after? And I don't know, but I'd give it at least an hour on either end, and then you're not gonna have as much problem. And then Paul said, cayenne chili? You mean chili pepper? Because I love cayenne. Did I spell it wrong? Or are you put Cheyenne?
Oh, did I spell it wrong? Okay.
Well, I don't know, but yeah, cayenne chili powder is what I have too. I get a big container of it.
Yeah, I didn't see it in your mix of Mexican seasoning, so.
Yes.
Because I heard that one also from Nutrition Facts. Does it help with weight loss?
Well, you are so right. So Dr. Greger wrote a book and does videos on little segments of his book, but he wrote How Not to Die, which I think a lot of us have read, and then he wrote How Not to Diet. And so in that book, I actually picked up a lot of his little tips. And one of them is when you have this kind of hot chili pepper, and ginger is another one. If you have one or the other, that tends to increase our metabolism a little bit. And so it can aid in weight loss. You're right. Another one is vinegar. So having 2 teaspoons of vinegar at every meal, he says, might help to boost things. So it's just something, if you like it, why not?
Okay, thank you.
I think, yeah, thanks for bringing that up, because I've been loving his little tips. Okay, any questions?
Yeah, I've got a few questions.
Yes, Dave.
We've been eating a lot of this Lifelite, I guess they're soy crumbles.
Yeah.
And we know they're processed, but they're good. They don't have a lot of salt in them. I'm just wondering, you know, is it a bad thing to eat?
No, not at all. Especially if you're getting the lower sodium ones. If there's not too high in salt and you're not adding a bunch of salty things, that's fine. You know, it's all right. The soy curls have hardly any. I think there's no sodium in soy curls.
I was going to say, salt's not a problem for us. Our blood pressures are so low now.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I took mine while I was watching this, and it was like 98/60.
So you're a prime example of whole food plant-based diet right there. And then
Well,
you can get away with a little more.
Yeah, so, you know, I don't worry about eating a corn chip or something that's got a little bit of salt on it now. Mm-hmm. And, I mean, Jody, she almost has to eat salt to bring hers up because sometimes it's like 80 over, you know, low 60.
Gosh.
Yeah.
Gosh,
so,
I need to eat some of that.
And I'm off my blood pressure medication and everything else. I do take one medication that I've been told at about 10 points, but it averages about 105 over, you know, the low 60s. That's the norm for me.
Awesome. That's like the Yamamamo Indians.
Well, I fall asleep a lot. And the other thing I wanted to ask you about is I like soy milk, unsweetened soy milk. Mm-hmm. And I'm just wondering, is there a limit on how much of that you should drink or shouldn't drink a day? Because, I mean, I could drink 3 glasses easily a day.
You know, I've talked about this before. You know, a lot of the research on soy, they give it kind of a bad name, and it was all bad research. And so really it's fine to have it, but like with everything, it should be moderation. So 2-3 servings of soy a day is generally just fine. So I think it's fine.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else? Okay.
Oh, I have one question.
Oh, yes.
Okay, about your beets. What can I do? I've got a lot of beets. What can I do with them? Like freeze them?
You know, I've never tried to freeze them, but when I had so many, I was wondering what the heck I was going to do. I usually roast them, and then I will eat them all week. You can grate them raw and make it into a nice little salad with some lemon juice.
Uh-huh.
Like that. I would assume you could freeze them, but I've never done it. But I would
Okay.
assume you could. I would cook it first, I think.
I think I'll research it. Thank you.
Yeah, sorry, I'll look that up too.
Baking them, slicing and baking them are really nice also. You don't need too any seasoning. Just thin them about between 1/8 and 1/4 of an inch thick and put them in an oven for 45 minutes. I'm not sure the timing. I always check them.
Yeah, me too.
Lay them flat.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's good.
And if you want to make them real thin and watch it carefully, you can almost believe you're having potato chips. Almost.
You know, that's a great one. You're right. Because I've seen that recipe for this kind of beet chips. You're absolutely right. That's a great idea.
Tastes good too.
Mm-hmm.
I bet the chickens would love them.
Deb, are you with Sutter or the Med Center?
I am working very limited part-time at Sutter. I was at the Med Center back in the day when Mary and Linda worked there. But I've been at Sutter for like 11 years. But now I'm retired, but I just work on call.
Oh, okay. In the north area, like Roseville, or?
In Roseville, yeah. I will work in the outpatient setting, though, not in the hospital.
Okay.
Okay, I think we could wrap it up, Linda.
Awesome job as always. So be sure to send me your slides.
I will send you the slides. Sorry for my little technical difficulties with that weirdo jumping up and talking about weight loss.
Hey, we handle glitches. We take all the glitches in stride.
Okay, good.
We don't
All right.
commonly have a glitchless presentation, so it's all okay. It's all good. Thanks so much. In 2 weeks, you're coming back, and we're
I'm
gonna.
coming back. I'm going to talk about batch cooking. I might actually batch cook while we talk. I'm not really sure yet.
Sounds awesome. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Thanks,
Thank
everybody.
you.
Have a great
you.
rest of your day.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.